Hello, my name is Michelle Glover. I'm the Lab Digital Solutions Specialist for Dentsply Canada. Today I wanted to walk you through the workflow on how you can actually add support tubes prior to printing digital denture files from the Inlab Software 20 prior to using the Lucitone digital print workflow with Carbon. It is required that the dentures have support tubes going across the entire arch to ensure that the integrity is met while it's printing. So we're going to use a third-party software called Meshmixer. So Meshmixer icon looks like this one right here. So when you open up Meshmixer, this is the screen that you are taken to. So the first step when to the screen is to import your files in question. So I'm going to import a lower denture here as step one. So we want to essentially add two support tubes going across the arch for both the upper and the lower. And there's a couple additional T support tubes that we'll create for the upper as well as one for the lower. So I'm going to walk you through both of those workflows today. Now, when you first bring in a denture to the Meshmixer software, if ever it comes up where it's red like so, essentially what the software is identifying here is potentially a couple of meshing issues with the actual file itself. So there's an easy way to actually adjust this, and we do that by creating basically a solid denture base. So what we'll do is we'll have the software essentially fill in any of the meshing holes that it's currently focusing upon, which is why we're seeing the base in red. So we'll come over here to the left-hand side and we'll hit edit. And there's an option here that's called make solid. Okay, so we're going to hit make solid. And what it's first going to do is it's going to create a solid lower base here. Now, one thing to note, when it does make the base solid like so, although it has, again, created a solid base and now we're no longer seeing it in red, what you are going to notice is that the sockets haven't been preserved with the specific locator identifications, which is specific to that of the digital IPN 3D teeth with the Lucitone digital print workflow with Carbon. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we not only create those socket preservation, but we also want to ensure that all the socket space, like the embrasures and things like that, that they're not kind of fuzzy like we're seeing here. So two things we're going to do is we're going to come up to where it says solid type. Right now it's set to fast. We're going to hit sharp edge preserve, and we're going to hit update. So what it's going to do is it's going to basically create a sharp edge to the actual base itself. Perfect. So now, although the embrasures look a little bit nicer, what we're also going to do now is we're going to want to preserve the socket space itself. So we're going to come over here to where it says solid accuracy and mesh density, and we're going to increase those values here. So I typically tend to go to the max here, and then I'll hit update. And what is it going to do is now it's going to, again, still make the base solid, but it's going to preserve those sockets themselves so that we see the locators in the socket, which will actually line up with the digital IPN teeth. So that's what we're going to do here now. The arch is now ready for adding the support tubes. Now, one thing you will notice, once you accept the final kind of solid step, after we increase the mesh density and the solid accuracy, you'll notice that under Object Browser, we now have two lower bases. Okay, if we choose the top one, you're going to see that it changes to kind of this pink color. So that's to reflect the STL file that it had a little bit of mesh holes within it. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to delete that one once it's highlighted. And then we'll just click back to this lower base. So now it's solid. And you'll see that in brackets, it'll say solid here so that it's ready for you to add your support tubes. So when we're at the step of adding the support tubes, you're going to hit edit on the left-hand side again. But now you're going to see that there's an option here on the left that says add tube. So when you add a tube, this will come up. Now I always recommend under tube type that you choose line outside. I find this the easiest to kind of work within. So what you want to do is you want to basically create a tube to go across from premolar to premolar. And you want it to be just a couple millimeters below kind of the gum line. Okay, so what I typically do is I'll just kind of turn it on its side to be able to see a little bit better. and I'll go just a couple millimeters below. Now I'll hit accept here on the left, and it's going to now create that solid tube going across kind of premolar to premolar. Now, if you need to ever edit it, so let's say you forgot to kind of turn the model and maybe you're not a couple millimeters below, you can always go up to the left-hand side where it says actions, and you can always hit undo. And what it'll allow you to do is adjust. It'll bring you back to this step essentially that we see here on the screen. And at that point, we're able to manipulate the tube again. But essentially, this is kind of what we want to see. Is you want to see the tube, a couple millimeters below kind of the gum line there. But an important step is always looking at the intaglio surface as well. It might not be as relevant with the lower base, but definitely for the upper, you want to make sure that it's not going right through the intaglio surface, because that will, of course, affect your final fit for the denture base itself. So from here, I'm going to hit add tube again, and I'm now going to create a second tube going across kind of my molar region. So same rules apply, a couple millimeters kind of below the gum line. So I'll bring this back up here. I'm going to hit accept, and it's going to create now that second tube for me. So these will be the same tubes that you place for the upper, okay, in the same region, kind of premolar region and posterior molar region. The only difference is that we now need to add a T support tube for both the lower, and then there's two for the upper. So there's going to be one T that we create here on the lower, and where the T will sit is just behind the centrals. So the 4-1 and the 3-1, we're going to create a tube going from the back of the lingual surface of that area connected to the bar itself. So what we're going to see here is we're going to hit add tube. We're going to create it by attaching it to the existing tube there behind the premolars, and then we're going to bring this tube here just a couple millimeters below the anteriors, and we're going to hit accept. So now we've created a T behind the anteriors of the lower base. Now for the upper T's, essentially you create the T's and they connect into the palate. So I'll show you an example of the upper base as well. But just to give you an idea, you will still create a T. For the uppers, it's just two of them, and the T basically forms to the palate itself, whereas the lower, you'll see like so, just below, a couple millimeters below the gum line of your anterior centrals, allows you to create your bars. So this is essentially what you need for the lower, okay? Now for your try-in files, your support tubes go in the exact same places for upper and lower. The only difference that you're going to see from the try-in files is that you're going to see that obviously the teeth are included instead of the base where we see these sockets. So you wouldn't have to preserve the socket space at all with a try-in, of course. So with the try-ins, it's still the same support tubes that you're placing for upper and lower. Only difference is that you're going to, of course, see the teeth in place where we now see sockets, because, of course, it's a monolithic try-in. So at this point in time, we'd be able to hit File and Export. We'd be able to export this case as an STL. Okay, so that would be how we do our lower. Now for our upper, essentially what we're going to see here is more or less the same. The only difference is that we have the support tubes going right across, of course, our palate. So we go from our molar to molar, premolar to premolar. The only additional tube that we place is, of course, that one that I mentioned to create the T formation. So that's where we go into the palate. So it's really important that you turn this on the intaglio surface so that you can see that the tubes have not gone through, because of course that will affect the final fit. But essentially this is what you're looking for when it comes to the upper base. Okay, so you're going to have same two support tubes going across molar and premolar region, but where the T is concerned for the anterior portion is it's not going to go behind the centrals like we do for the lower. We're going to have it going into the actual palate of the denture. Okay, and then same thing for the posterior tube. Okay, so essentially when you're looking at the two of them together, this is what they look like, where you're able to see the two support tubes on both sides. Okay, obviously one being the upper, one being the lower, but this is essentially how you'll set up the support tubes.